What is the ideal combination for the first round for the Miami Dolphins? We're exploring that and a whole lot more on Power to the Pod, our mailbag episode 2 weeks out from the draft.
You are Locked On Dolphins, your daily Miami Dolphins podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, Miami, welcome to another episode of Locked On Dolphins. It is your team every day here on the Locked On Network. I'm your host, Kyle Krabs, a lifelong Miami Dolphins fan, host of Locked On Dolphins, co-host of Locked On NFL Scouting, author of Touchdown Miami on Substack, NFL staff writer for A to Z Sports. Special welcome and thank you to each and every one of you who are tuning into this mailbag episode of the show. So tapped into some of the Touchdown Miami community, which is author on Substack, right? And asked for some thoughts about what they wanted to hear about 2 weeks out from the start of the 2026 NFL Draft. We're kind of entering into the window where a lot of teams are going to start wrapping up their 30 visits and their local visits, and they're going to finalize the board, and everybody's going to go home and let it marinate, and then they could come in and the week of the draft, and then we're going to be pushing play and getting rocking and rolling. And this is obviously a monumental period for the Dolphins. So I tapped into the mailbag and said, what a great time 2 weeks out to hear from you guys. What's on your minds about the draft? So I've got a dozen questions or so. We'll tackle as many of them as we possibly can, starting with this one from Love. Given the depth at positions like corner and receiver, what positions or players offer us the best realistic value at 11 and 30? And I say realistic because someone like Jeremiyah Love, as the example, may not be there for us. I think for me, like, I have 4 top 10 grades on players in this class is like the blue chip, the real legit blue chip players. I think Caleb Downs is the one that has the best chance of reaching the Dolphins. Now, if you told me that the 4 blue chip guys are gone, and that's Styles, Rueben Bain, Caleb Downs, and Jeremiyah Love, and you're into not like tippy top of first round grades, but into like the just regular first round grades, is still a very exclusive club this year. I think Mansoor Delane, Francis Mauigoa, and Vega Ioane, the guard from Penn State, are the 3 best options that I see having a chance of making it to you at pick number 11. But the fact that this question gets parlayed into combination of picks, right? I can look at Mansoor Delane and say, I think Mansoor Delane is the best cornerback in the class. But the drop-off from there is nowhere near as severe, in my mind, as what the drop-off is both at guard and at offensive tackle. I don't think you're going to see a pass rusher unless it's Bain who makes it to you, and I predictably would not say Bain makes it to you. I think he does go like, his floor for me feels like Cincinnati. I'd be stunned if he got past them outside the top 10. So I don't predictably think it'll happen, but there is some buzz that there's some arm length stuff there. I think the best possible value that you could hope for, in my eyes, for a realistic combo pack is one of those, and I'd put Spencer Fano in the conversation because I think the Dolphins will really like him for his style of play and what the Dolphins are expected to run under Bobby Slowik. I think an offensive lineman at 11, and then a pass rusher if a TJ Parker or an Akeem Mesidor or a Zion Young makes it to you at 30. Alternatively, you could also say Brandon Cisse, Colton Hood at corner. But for me, like, offensive lineman at 11 feels like where you're going to get the best value, unless that run happens, in which case maybe one of those blue chip players that we do talk about does fall in your lap. Finn's OG, given a doomsday scenario at 11, who is the most likely player that other teams would come up for? Okay, this is interesting. You're banking on a trade, somebody trading up for somebody that doesn't necessarily fit what the Dolphins are shopping for. Is there Do none of the wide receivers come off the board? If you get a doomsday scenario and Mendoza goes and Love goes, and I'm going to find the 10 most inconvenient players to be going off the board. Mendoza, Love, Mauigoa, Fano, Ioane, Sonny Styles, Rueben Bain, Arvell Reese, Caleb Downs, Mansoor Delane. If those 10 players hypothetically go off the board, could you maybe get somebody to come up in front of Dallas and the LA Rams for a wide receiver and get wide receiver 1? Because that would feel like a very inconvenient draw of the board for me. I don't think that, again, is predictively how the 12 is going to come off the board, because I didn't mention David Bailey. Although David Bailey would probably be trying to get up in front of the Cowboys, who are rumored to at least have some level of interest in trading up to go get David Bailey early in the draft. So I would say David Bailey or wide receiver 1 will be the 2 guys in that scenario. Now, there's some buzz out there that David Bailey might be going 2 to the Jets. Our next question comes from Jeff, the Land Shark Halfley. What's a disaster scenario for the first 3 rounds for the Dolphins? Very open-ended interpretation here. And I think what I would say, I wouldn't put like names on it, because there's a lot of names that maybe I don't love at 11, but I'd really like at 30. Or maybe I don't love at 30, but I'd really like at 43. Or I wouldn't like at 43, but if you tell me that they get at 75, or if you go up and make a splash from 75 and jump up into the end of the second round and you get a second round pick instead of having 4 third-round picks, maybe I'd like them there. I think the doomsday scenario here would be passing on offensive line early and watching Mauigoa, Ioane, Fano, Freeling, Caden Proctor, Blake Miller, Maxi Honachor, Chase Besantis, Emmanuel Pregnon, and Caleb Lomu all go off the board in the top 40. Right? If somebody who's too good to be true there goes at 11, and then you don't pick offensive line at 30, and then that run of 10 players happens, I don't know where you're going to find definitive, hey, we feel good about getting better on the offensive line this offseason. Now, what you would do, obviously, because you'd strike out at 43, is, are you coming back and looking at Jalen Farmer, who I like? Sounds like Keelan Rutledge has some momentum to go a little earlier than I like him. I like Keelan Rutledge from Georgia Tech as an offensive guard, as like a third-round pick. There's some buzz that he might be a guy that sneaks into like the top 40 or so. That to me is like, if you're going to preach physicality, if you're going to preach getting better up front on the line of scrimmage on both sides of the football, going safety corner with your first 2 picks and then striking out on the offensive line and maybe reaching on an edge player because you want to get a pass rusher, and then you're into the 7th round and you went defense with corner, safety, and edge, who maybe wasn't a great value, and who you're looking on the offensive line left at 75, and now you got to start getting into addressing wide receiver. That to me would probably be the combination of picks that if you told me ahead of time, this is where the positions are going to be, I would be most anxious. Now, that doesn't guarantee that like you wouldn't get a player that I wouldn't like, but I think that approach, that formula of picks, would have me on pins and needles if you told me today that's what it's going to look like, and I had to wait 2 weeks to find out who the actual players are. We got some more questions on the other side of the break. Make sure you guys stick with us. The NBA playoffs are here. Every possession matters. Every matchup is magnified, and every game can swing a series. Right now, FanDuel is giving new customers a great way to get on the action. Here's what I like about it. You can bet $5 and get $250 in bonus bets. If your first bet wins, the app makes it super easy to follow the action with player stats, trends, and matchups all in one place. And during the playoffs, that extra insight really matters when you're looking at stars, role players, and key moments. It makes the entire playoff experience more engaging from start to finish. So head to FanDuel.com to get started. FanDuel, play your game. Due to extend the invitation for everybody to check out the Everydayer Club here on the Locked On Network, you get ad-free episodes of the program, access to a group chat with the Locked On Community Discord, so you can chat it up with other listeners of this program. You can find the join link in the show notes below. Our next question comes courtesy of which one I wanted to start with. Rand Dizzle. I wanted to start with this one. Any chance we swap one of our many thirds for a 2 this year, similar to what happened in some of the past years with think about the running back trades, right? Where they trade a 4 for a 3 with to go up and get Jalen Wright. And then the following year, they turn a 4 into a 3. So Houston could come up and get Woody Marks. And that's the 87th pick. You ended up turning a 4th round pick last year into the 87th pick this year. For Woody Marks, so the Texans could go up and get him at running back. I doubt it. Now, there was a report yesterday that came out from Jordan Schultz. I'll read it. The expectation among many NFL teams is that the 2026 NFL draft will be one of the more trade-heavy drafts in recent memory, according to multiple league sources. Specifically on the defensive side of the ball, edge, corner, and linebacker are all strong and deep, while wide receiver is typically considered one of the most talented offensive positions. Several executives I've spoken to believe we'll see a flurry of activity in the first half of round 1. Additionally, because this specific draft lacks depth in the later rounds, many teams plan to pursue extra day 2 and early day 3 picks. Maybe, but what I have a hard time reconciling, just use my grades, right? And this is just my grades. It's only one person's opinion. You have a scarcity that I think does exist early, where you're looking at how many first-round grades you have versus how many first-round picks you have. How many second-round grades, first and second-round grades combined do you have versus the top 64 picks? I've got 59 players with top 10 first round and second round grades. And that's universally scouting. These lists will probably be even shorter for teams based on the schemes that they're going to play, because their criteria gets even more narrow. So if you're a team that's picking at the end of the second round, like you may be getting definitively third round caliber players, where the perception is next year it's going to be a much stronger draft. It certainly profiles as a stronger draft at the top. What is interesting is, for me, by the time you get down to the fourth round grades, if I look at the number of first, second, third, and fourth round grades that I have versus the amount of picks that are in rounds 1 through 4, it's 138 grades for 140 spots. So by the time you hit the fifth round, like, rounds 3 and 4 really fill up and catch up to get almost an equal value for, like, the caliber of the players by the time you get to the start of the fifth round. So your third round picks, it's kind of in the sweet spot where teams will be getting appropriate value. I think if you are going to leverage a pick to get a 2027 pick, especially one of substance, you're probably looking at dangling 43, right? Because my cutoff for first, second round grades is 59, and it'll be probably more limited than that for every individual team based off their criteria that they do and don't care about and qualify. 43, like, you might, and I would generally believe, like, you're going to get to 50 and there's a perceived drop and cliff. And then everybody that's picking between 50 and 65, like, that whole back half of round 2 is like, I don't know that I'm really getting an appropriate valued player for where this pick is in a vacuum. Now, this year's class, it is what it is. So I don't know the third round pick you're going to be able to dangle, where I think there's a surplus of players that in a vacuum would be drafted in the third round to get a second round pick. I think that's the blockade and the challenge that they would face. Josh wants to know if there's any positions I would love to see Miami double down at. All of them. Not literally all of them. I would not double dip at running back and quarterback. I would love to see a double dip at wide receiver, preferably in rounds 3 and 4. If you get one early, cool. You end up spending 2 top 100 picks on wide receivers, and one of them comes at 30, and it's Denzel Boston who's in on a visit, or it's Omar Cooper Jr., or it's Casey Concepcion. Like, awesome. I'm going to be really gassed up about getting a player like that. And then if you get to the 4 third-round picks and you get another one, great. If you take 2 in the third round, great. Like, that's kind of my expectation, is where those wide receiver picks will come into play. Tight end, I'd be totally cool, but I think one of them's probably got to be a late round pick. If you told me they go one of the top 100 picks and then a late round pick and double dip at tight end, and one of them's kind of a fullback hybrid, like, I'm on board there. I would love to see a guard and a tackle in the draft, or at least one of those guys to have some positional flex. Edge defenders, I'd be cool double dipping. Cornerbacks and safeties, I'd be cool double dipping. I don't know that they're going to. No, they'll probably double dip at defensive back, but I don't know that if they would straight up double dip at corner, just because of the amount of bodies they have in that room. And those guys are kind of promised anything, right? But you do kind of look at the number of competitors they have there and say, well, maybe year one you let this thing shake out and not double dip. But I wouldn't hate it. So I think you can make the case for a lot of positions. Just draft dogs. Who is your Charles Harris pick at 11? Sir, I am not at liberty to disclose. That's a big show every year. And we're getting there because I'm done. How many total grades do I have done? And I have this stratosphere of the draft done with finalized grades, with the exception of maybe going back and tinkering with how I put weights on for the Dolphins, because I know that's a big question, is, are you doing a Dolphins-specific draft board this year? I've done last year with 33rd team. I had like 350 grades. I put them all on a draft board, but then I tailored the traits that I grade and weighted them for the Dolphins scheme. It's a little bit harder to do that because we don't know as much about the scheme. But I do plan on, yes, having some variation of a Dolphins-specific draft board, and tinkering and fuddling with that is kind of the last step in that process. And I'm trying to finish all of my grades before I really dive into that, so that when that window for me opens, I don't have to go back and forth and like change grades to tailor for the team, but then I'm not done all the grades. So then I got to redo the process again. It's the joys of having team specific coverage and doing macro draft stuff as a whole. But I'm at 245 finalized grades. So we're probably looking like by this weekend I will be done, and then I'll finalize what that looks like. And then by the beginning of next week, I'll kind of formalize that process of having a Dolphin-specific board. And at that point, we will do the Charles Harris Memorial Invitational show of please don't pick this player. 303 Kane, our last one here before the break. Considering it's a multi-year build, what positions would you be okay waiting to address either after June 1st in free agency or in the 2027 draft? This is going to feel like a cop-out. And it's not. I promise it's not. I don't care. Like, you could tell me that they don't hit a home run with edge, right? Now, I do think there is some level of importance in getting an offensive group around the quarterback that you chose to pay to get some guys for him to grow with. And I think that really should be something that you take into consideration. But if you tell me, hey, we didn't get a long-term right tackle. Hey, we don't know that we found a good value at tight end, so we didn't draft one. Hey, we didn't draft a quarterback this year. I expect that they will. I think it'll be late. Hey, I'd be surprised if it was some positions, but I would be okay with any of it, because I'm just, as I continue to get more and more indoctrinated with the draft, right? And you learn these experiences every year. This should be about, especially with how blank of a canvas the Dolphins are right now, you're farming for talent. And talent can be found at any position. And, I would hate to go in with a grocery list of we need 2 of this, 2 of that, and I need to come away with X, Y, and Z because our roster needs it. Don't do that. Who's the best fits football wise, skill set wise, athleticism wise, age wise, maturity wise, culture wise? Just pick them, right? Like your roster, no matter how much you try, you could trade down 5 times and get 30 picks in this draft. You're going to have needs by the time the roster rolls around to a 53-man cut anyway. It's just the reality of where this team is at. So don't force anything. And if it turns out not being, you don't get offensive line, well, then I really hope you love the players that, or I really hope I love the players that they pick for those other spots for the offensive line early, and they don't get their first offensive line pick till 75 or 87, hypothetically. Because that's going to be a tough draw versus what I personally believe about the class. But it doesn't make me right or wrong, right? So we got a few more. We have some questions about Bobby Slowik's offensive scheme and Malik Willis. Jonah and his path to success. On the other side of the break. Make sure you guys stick with us. It's tax time, but for a lot of us, the old way of doing taxes is, it's a lot. And trying to book an appointment that's not the most convenient. Sitting in a waiting room with a stack of papers, emailing back and forth, wondering if they really get your situation. But this year, you're getting a major tax upgrade. Intuit TurboTax now has in-person locations nationwide. You can meet face-to-face with a real tax expert, and your documents get uploaded straight to your TurboTax app on the spot. Just like that, you're done. Your TurboTax expert works to get you every dollar that you deserve while you get real-time notifications as you go about your day. It's the relief of walking in and meeting a real person and walking out knowing your taxes are being handled right. Head to TurboTax.com/local to find a store near you and book your appointment today. Our next question comes from Jack Jones Stan, who wants to know if we could bring Jack Jones back. If you can get Jack Jones for a vet minimum contract, sure. Do I think that's going to happen as Jack Jones switches to Drew Rosenhaus for representation this offseason? No, I don't. I would be plenty happy to see Jack Jones back in the fray for the Dolphins. I am just expecting he will have garnered more than a minimum salary contract, which is what he played for last year with his play this past season. Maybe not a long-term, multi-year, big money contract, but I think he'll get more than vet min. Earl, what do you think the extensions for Achane, Brewer, and Brooks will look like? How would you work the contracts? So if it's going to be like how Green Bay structured contracts, and it very easily could be, and please don't say, well, it's not because Brandon Shore's here and they put void years on their contracts, because the Packers have more than half of their top 10 contracts from a cost perspective have void years as well, right? But by and large, when they are first getting started with a player in free agency, they only guarantee the first year's compensation fully guaranteed. Now, there might be rolling guarantees after that, but they traditionally always give themselves an out after 1 year from a guaranteed money standpoint. Does this regime treat these players like that, despite the fact that they've been in Miami because it's a new regime? I can't imagine that De'Von Achane and his camp would go for something like that. He's probably looking for as much guaranteed security as he can possibly get. Miami will probably leverage the franchise tag guarantees against that for a total value of like this year's compensation and the next 2 years of franchise tags. How much does that add up to be? That would be fully guaranteed. We'll guarantee that plus some ceiling on top of that. Right? I think the Achane contract will probably be most of them are 3-year extensions. 3 years, 50, between 57 and 63 million would be my guess. That's my best guess. It's not going to be cheap. But at $20 or $21 million, it would be the third highest percentage of annual average salary against the cap for contracts. Now, it would be, if he gets to 21, that would be the highest just pure average from a raw numbers perspective, but that's where the growth of the cap kicks in. And we talked about that the other day, and there's some people that were like, whoa, if that's what we're paying, don't pay him. And I hear you, but no, they seem to want to get it done. I would expect it's going to get done. Brewer and Brooks, Brewer, I think you could slot him north of Creed Humphrey, which is 18, and get something done. And I feel pretty good about your chances to do that. It's just a question of how hard do they want to play on that line. Obviously, I think the Linderbaum contract is such an outlier. I don't think it's super applicable, but it is notable that that's now where the conversation starts for centers. And then Brooks, probably same ballpark. If he's above if he's above 17, he'd be the second. 17 and a half, he'd be the third highest paid linebacker in football. It's Fred Warner's at 21, and then Roquan's at 20. Right? Like, I think all three of those guys have some semblance of an argument to make that their annual average should equal 20. And if you get all three of those done in this offseason, and it's just call them 3-year, $60 million contracts, you have 4 years to spread that out plus their compensation this year to kind of actually bring like the true average down. And that would be the motivation for not waiting until after the year to do it. What do you think Jonah's path to success is? Does he stay beside Paul, or should Hafley and company slide him back to the right side? Would changing him back hurt his development? I don't think it would hurt his development. But I do think there's some argument to the muscle memory of being on the right-hand side that might kind of iron out some of the negative habits that we saw for Jonah, where we sometimes we stop our feet, sometimes we overextend and get over aggressive. He's obviously got some of it's the scheme, and that's where I think there is continuity, like the continuity of Bobby Slowik and that style of offense, even if it's not authentically the same offensive line coach. I think having parallels with the concepts and the calls and the terminology will be very helpful for Jonah. I know he's in there busting his rear end. I know he's doing that. So I'm hopeful, but I wouldn't dismiss a move to the right side. I think that should be on the table, in my opinion. And our last one is a double dip from Jack Jones Stan. Regarding Bobby Slowik's offensive scheme, what about it are strengths and weaknesses that Malik can excel but also needs to improve? So I think all of these Shanahan-esque systems, right? If you're willing to get the quarterback up underneath center and take play action passing and take boot action and get outside the pocket and get your quarterbacks on the move, that's where I think this system can really lean into the strengths of Malik Willis, especially with the presence of De'Von Achane, is if you're getting horizontal stretch, if we're taking run action to one side and then we boot and we run the other way, we can very easily get Malik out on the edges to throw the football and create stress for defenders. And, how do we maintain the pocket? I think there's a whole conversation that can be had about your aiming points as a pass rusher and how that's going to look fairly different for the Dolphins this year offensively versus some of the past years with Tua, who's been much more of a stationary in the pocket passer. The thing that I think is the big area to watch for Malik is he's had a lot of success the past 2 years in Green Bay throwing the ball outside the numbers. He's had a ton of success downfield pushing the ball outside the numbers, but he's really only had, I could probably count him on the throwing chart here. Okay. 10 yards or further downfield between the numbers completions in 2 seasons, we have a completion to Jaden Reed for 17 yards on January 5th. We have an incomplete pass to Dontavion Wicks, up 34-0 against the Saints in December. Chicago, December of this year, we had a 3rd and 4 incomplete pass to Christian Watson on the 4-yard line. Malik Willis, incomplete, short middle to Romeo Doubs against Jacksonville in October of 24 on 2nd and 10. Completion for 15 yards to Doubs against the Colts in September of 2024. We're almost there. Hang with me. Packers-Titans, September 2024. Willis complete deep down the middle for Romeo Doubs. And then a touchdown to Christian Watson against Baltimore in the game 2 days after Christmas for 39 yards in the first quarter of December 2025. That's in 2 seasons. 10 or more air yards downfield in between the numbers. It's a very, very small sample size. And you can contrast that. I do want to pull it up for C.J. Stroud. And compare how his rookie season with, you know what, we should probably do 23 and 24, which were the 2 Bobby Slowik seasons. The volume here for throws 10 or more yards downfield in between the numbers is very, very large. Stroud had over 1,000 attempts in those 2 seasons combined. Let me see if I can get the splits. I'm doing this courtesy of True Media. Between the hashes, 127 attempts between the hashes, 185 attempts from the left numbers to the left hash, and then 181 attempts from the right numbers to the right hash. So you're talking like 500 attempts between the numbers versus a very small sample size for Malik Willis. I think that's the area that is going to be like the defining success or failure for Malik in the Slowik offense. Is they like to do a lot of work over the middle of the field, as all the Shanahan offenses do. Now, Malik has thrived the past 2 years with a lot of volume outside the numbers, on the perimeter, outbreaking patterns, throwing on the move, and getting guys down the field where you're creating some high lows and some stress, and you're putting the defender in conflict on the outside. That's going to do it for us here on today's episode of Locked On Dolphins, Power to the Pod. Hope you guys enjoyed. Come back, see us again tomorrow. We got one more this week. Fins up. Hope to see you then.